So the first thing we're going to do is work on all the black parts. And the colour we're going to start with is Basilicanum Grey. And this is for the clothes and the vambraces or wrist guards, whatever you want to call them. I don't think they're called vambraces actually. So, and of course, the shoes. And so the first colour that we use is Basilicanum Grey. And this is just to establish that pre-shaded layer. So we just want to start painting this Basilicanum Grey all over the parts that we want to be black. And next up, we're going to give all those black details a coat of black Templar. And next up, we want to give all of those black details a highlight of some thinned down Dawnstone. So we just want to pick out things like these rivets on the arm guards and any of the kind of edges around any of the kind of the harder parts, like on the arm guards, but as well on the kind of like on the clothes. We just want to pick out the raised bits of the folds. Like so. With all of that black done, the next thing we're going to work on is the flesh, and I've actually got multiple of these models to show you what I'm going to do, and I'm going to be doing 4 different flesh tones. And so the colours that I'm going to be using are Darkoath Flesh, Wyldwood, Fyreslayer Flesh and Guilliman Flesh. And I want to demonstrate how to do all 4, and that'll include highlighting up all of that skin. So the first thing we're going to do is obviously establish a base coat, and what you want to do is you want to pick one of the 4 colours. And I think for this guy, I'm going to use Fyreslayer Flesh for this one. So what you do is you take a fair amount on your brush, because you want to be quite quick here, because you don't want to kind of leave it to dry for too long when you're doing the kind of large areas of flesh. And so I'm going to start here on the arm, and I'm just going to paint this Fyreslayer Flesh all over, trying to be quite quick and use as few brush strokes as I can, but just making sure that I work it into all the areas of the skin. Like so. And it doesn't matter too much if I get it on the kind of the metal plugs that are around the body, because we can go back over these with some silver later. So what you want to do is you want to go around picking out all of these areas, and it's the face, the arms and the legs. So for the leg, for example, you just want to take a fair amount on your brush, and you want to be very careful as to, well, very quick, I should say, to kind of make contact with the model and just pull it down, and just be quite quick as you go about it, making sure that you get good coverage all over, and not giving it too much time to dry. Because if you give it too much time to dry, you'll get that kind of, that weird line where the 2 contrast layers or brush strokes will meet. And you'll notice I'm always starting up by the recess and just pulling it all the way down to the foot. Like so. So that's one colour. Another one to use is, for this one, we're going to use Wyldwood, and the application is broadly the same. You still take a fair amount of this on your brush, and then you just make contact by a recess, and you just pull the Wyldwood all the way over those muscles. Again, don't worry too much if you get this on the metal bits, because we will just cover over these later. And because we're going to be using a non-contrast paint for that, it's all right, because we can just cover over it. Similarly again, I'm just making sure that I'm going reasonably fast and picking out the whole of the muscle. Do that again. We'll do it on this leg this time. So what you see is I've got a fair amount on my brush. I'm just going to make contact and start pulling it down from where I make the contact, making sure to get a good coverage all over this section of the flesh. You always just want to do a whole section at a time. kind of don't want to start in one place and move on before you've finished it, as it were. So for example, you don't want to do like the front of the leg and then come back and think, oh, I'll just do the back of the leg a bit later whilst I do the rest of the fronts. There we go, like that. Similarly again, having run out of painting handles, and this lady here, I'm going to use the Guilliman Flesh. And we just want to, for example, on the face, because it's a bald head, just want to start down here by the chin and just pull the Guilliman Flesh all over it in these big broad brush strokes. Again, just trying to make sure that we're keeping the paint wet as we do it. So we're just being quite quick, like so. Because the last thing you want is a nice weird line going down the center of a bald head. Now, Guilliman Flesh is the thinnest of the paints. So you might need a little bit more than you would Fyreslayer Flesh or Darkoath Flesh or Wyldwood, just to get that kind of tone that you're after. I kind of want a nice soft pinky tone, so I'm not using very much. But if I was to use a lot more, I'd get a lot darker. I'll keep doing the arm on this one as well, just to keep demonstrating the technique that I'm using. Like so. And the last colour is, of course, Darkoath Flesh. And that's for this lady here. Now, Darkoath Flesh dries very differently to the other flesh paints. It kind of initially looks sort of similar to Fyreslayer Flesh and Guilliman Flesh, but as it dries, it kind of really kind of desaturates the drier it gets. And next up, we're going to add some highlights to the flesh, and we're going to do two parts to this. We're going to do highlights on the lighter tones of flesh and highlights on the darker tones. So for the lighter tones, what we want to use is Kislev Flesh. So we thin some down on our palette, and we just take a tiny little bit, and we just pick an area to begin. And what we want to do is we want to pick out all of the kind of the little scars that you can see scattered around the miniature here, like this. We also want to kind of pick out the edges of any of the kind of the harder edges of the muscles. So like down here on the knee, we've got a nice hard edge there like that. So we just want to add this Kislev Flesh like so, just around where the darker paint has settled. Similarly again on the other side. Got a little line here. Just want to add it too, and going down the leg. And when highlighting black skin, we're going to use Karak Stone. And it's much the same as we did with the Kislev Flesh. We just want to pick out the hard edges of the flesh. And next up, just to finish off all of those skin tones, we want to add just a little bit of Flayed One Flesh in just some of the tiny little areas just around where the light would catch. So things on the elbow and on like the bridge of the nose and on any of the scars. And you can do this across all of the skin tones. And with that done, we've now got some really awesome looking flesh tones on our Repentia. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on all of the purity seals scattered around all of the model. And for this, we're going to be using some skeleton horde. So we just want to take some on our brush and we just want to find where all the purity seals are. And we just want to start coating the skeleton horde all over. Like so. And with all that skeleton horde applied, we're now going to do the metallics. And for this, we're going to be using some thinned down iron warriors. And this is for all the things like the eviscerator chainswords and the various power armor plugs around their flesh and things like that. So you just want to go around picking out all of these metallic details with this paint. And then we'll come back. And next up, we want to paint in any of the details that we want to be gold. And for this, we're going to be using Retributor Armour. And this is for areas like the hilt on any of the eviscerators, the kind of the pommels and the various skulls you can see around, as well as kind of any banding details that you'll find on some of the eviscerators. So you just want to paint this Retributor Armour all over like this. Once that's done, before we give it a shade, we're just going to colour in the rest of the base coats. And what we're going to do is we're going to paint in any of these soft wraps on the handles, any of these kind of head sack casings that you can see on some of the models, and any wraps like that with some Blood Angels red. So we just take some on our brush, pick a place to start. So I'm going to start on the top of the head, and I'm just going to start painting this Blood Angels red all over, like so. And next up, we're going to use some Snakebite Leather to colour in any of the kind of little strings and straps and things that you can find scattered around the model. So for example, on this Repentia, we've got the back of this leather strap on her leg, as well as the rosary beads being held on around the top of her head sack. You just want to carefully avoid the rosary beads themselves because those are going to be obviously a different colour. And next up, we're going to use some Magos Purple to colour in all of the wax purity seals. And next up, we want to add some Apothecary White to any of the parts that we want to be white. And so this is for things like the rosary beads that you can see kind of scattered around the model. So there's usually a necklace, like so, and as well as the rosary beads on this particular lady's head. So we're just adding a very little amount of this, just to kind of apply that shade in between the beads, like so. Just add a little bit more into that, like that. But you also want to use this as an opportunity to add any Apothecary White to any of the hair on any of the Repentia that have it. Like so. With that Apothecary White applied, it's now time to add some shade to those metallics. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab some Basilicanum Grey on our brush, and we're just going to paint this all over all of the silver and all of the gold that we've already added. We don't want to use loads because we don't really want to just drown these metallics in this colour. Just want to apply a nice darken shading to that metal. With all that Basilicanum Grey applied, we're now going to finish highlighting the model, and we're onto the home stretch now, guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the white details because these are the smallest ones and get them out of the way. So the colour we're going to be using is some thinned down Ulthuan Grey, and all we want to do is just place a dot of this Ulthuan Grey on top of these white rosary beads, just like that. It's actually sometimes a lot easier just to use the side of the brush rather than the tip. Like that. You really don't need very much Ulthuan Grey as you're doing this on the brush. You just keep the amount that's on your brush nice and controlled, like this. Simple as that. So you want to go around and do all of those rosary beads, so I am going to do the ones under the neck as well. But additionally, when you're painting the hair, you just want to grab a tiny little bit on your brush and you just want to pick out the strands of the hair. Like this. Using the same paint. And next up, we're going to give all of the silver details a highlight with some thinned down iron hand steel. We just want to run this all the way along all of the edges of the silver details. And next up, we're going to highlight the gold using some Liberator Gold. And next up, we're going to paint in the eyes using some Screaming Skull. You just want to use a teeny little dot right on the eye. Once that Screaming Skull is dry, the last thing to do is to paint in the pupil with a dot of Black Templar. And with all of that done, all that's left to do is paint in the base to match the rest of your army. And the Repentia are all done. I love this kit. They're so dynamic and aggressive, and I just really love these models. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.